What's going on, everybody? Welcome. And today, I have a thought in my mind. It popped up in my head yesterday, and I just didn't make a video until today. And the thought I had in my head was: are men allowed to be weak? Pay attention to that statement, that question I just asked. Are men allowed to be weak? Now, I asked this question because for many years, growing up, I was brought up around people, both men and women, who had this idea that being vulnerable was a sign of weakness growing up as a young man, as a boy, as a young man, as a grown man, that being vulnerable, showing emotion was a sign of weakness. That if you were ever seen showing some kind of emotion other than aggression or anger or happiness, anything other than that would be considered weak. So I wonder now, in this day and age of social media, and for the most part, from what I've seen, people have become a lot more, I won't say people have been showing their vulnerable side more. I will say some people are starting to now recognize those vulnerable moments that they have in their life. Like I said, it used to be a time when you wouldn't even recognize any kind of vulnerability. Like, forget even talking about it. You wouldn't even want to recognize it in the first place. But I see we're getting to a point now. We're not there fully, but we're getting to a point now where people are starting to recognize those vulnerable moments, where men are starting to actually I don't want to say be comfortable, because it's still a lot to unpack when it comes to men and our vulnerable moments, our weaknesses. And I want to know, are men allowed, notice I'm saying the word allowed, are men allowed to be weak? Are we at a place as a society, both from men and women, where men can be allowed to show weakness? Now, if you are listening to this video, looking at this video, and you hear me say the word, when you hear me use the terms weak and vulnerable interchangeably, right? And you don't have a problem with that, that is the point of this video. Notice, if you look at the title of the video, it will say, are men allowed to be weak? But also notice, one of the first words I used in my first sentence was vulnerable. See? Now, in some people's mind watching this video, that might go over your head. You might have even thought about that. But think about how often we try to use weak and vulnerable as interchangeable words, as though they mean the same thing. Weak and vulnerable do not mean the same thing. Okay? They're not synonymous. However, we grow up in a society, and it is championed in many cases where you can't be vulnerable because it is considered weak. Right? So, I'm going to ask again. Are men allowed to be weak? Now, some people might watch this video and that still may go over their head. But those who are intelligent, who are wise enough to see what I'm doing, will understand this. How often are men able to be in a space where they're comfortable being vulnerable? without being considered weak? How often? Just actually think about that. You know, if you know a guy and they're going through a situation where it is making them very vulnerable, you know, and they don't know how to express those vulnerable moments. Okay? Think about how often that man has been or is able to even be in a space amongst their family, friends, privately, wherever, whenever, be in a space where they are allowed to express that vulnerability and do so without the fear of being considered or called weak. All right? And how many of you watching this video have had a guy? I'm speaking from the male perspective because I'm a male. I'm a man. So I'm speaking from the male perspective and my own personal perspective. How many of you know a guy, a young man, a little boy, a grown man, or an elderly man? Doesn't matter the age. How many of you know a man who is in a state of vulnerability and you yourself have considered that vulnerability to be weakness? Be honest. Be honest. And I'll be first to admit, I've been guilty of that too. Right on. All right. So I will admit to being guilty of that as well. Not saying it's right, but I can also recognize times in my life where I have shown that mentality where I see vulnerability from a man as weakness. It is not right. It is not correct. It is, in fact, what we call toxic nowadays. The term toxic is a very powerful term now. That is considered toxic. Where you make it, you have friends, you have male friends in an environment where they don't even feel comfortable being in a space where they can be vulnerable and not be considered weak at the same time. How many of you have been guilty of putting your male friends in that situation? And you really gotta be honest with yourself. You gotta say, well, shoot, it may be something small to you, but to that friend, to that guy, it means a lot. Where he doesn't feel comfortable being vulnerable around people that he considers his family or friends. Think about that. Think about the idea of a guy saying, I don't feel comfortable around my own family or friends being vulnerable because for fear I may be considered weak by the people that I love and that love me. That's a very powerful thought. So, I just wanted to, talk about that. It was in my mind, so I decided, just to throw it out there and see what the people thinking about. Are men allowed to be weak? Are we? Women, your significant others, your male partners, your husbands, your boyfriends, your fiancés. Are you guilty? Are you guilty as a woman of seeing the vulnerable side of your man as weakness? Be honest. It's okay. Are you guilty of that? Just a thought. Anyway, I'll catch you all later. Hope you have a great day. Peace.